Well, shalom, haverim. Welcome, my friends, to our Bible study on the book of Genesis. Today we're going to be in chapter 49. We are getting close to the end here. Genesis is one of my favorite books of the Bible, so I have a sense of accomplishment as we get to the close of a 50 chapter book of the Bible. But at the same time, a little sad to leave this tremendous book that covers such a wide variety of topics and subjects. A couple of things I want to talk about before we actually get into the verse by verse study of Genesis 49 is the content of this 49th chapter of Genesis has to do with the last words of Jacob before he dies. Spoiler alert, he's going to die at the end of this chapter. And he will give some instructions as to how his earthly remains are to be cared for and so forth. But before that, his last words consist of a series of blessings upon his sons. And some of those blessings will take it's kind of a backhanded blessing, you might say, carry some negative connotations. But there's an aspect of prophecy in these words that he will speak. One of the challenges of prophecy is that it is often couched in symbolic language, figurative language. Words have a variety of shades of meaning. And sometimes prophecies, let's say Old Testament prophecies, for example, they're very hard to figure out what they mean unless you have the New Testament saying this prophecy was fulfilled in such a way, usually connected with the life of Messiah. There's going to be a reference to the last days, or the last days is the way that term Acharit Hayamim is usually translated in English Bibles. And it's really difficult to tell in this chapter what that term means. It could be the last days of Jacob's life. It could be the last days of the lives of his sons. Could be the last days that they spend in Egypt before they go to the Promised Land. The Dake Reference Bible, which I often make reference to, says that it has to do with the first and second comings, advents of the Messiah, of the Christ, Yeshua, Jesus. And I think some of these prophecies do, and I'll point out the ones that I think they do. But there are some other aspects of these prophecies, like, for example, in a couple of places, it refers to the location of the tribes. You would think in the Promised Land, but as we look at a map that shows where the various tribes were located after the conquest and the establishment of the land of Israel, these two tribes aren't where Jacob's prophecy describes them. So, what do we do with that? The way I approach that is I believe that the Bible is inspired by God to the extent that when we have a passage in Scripture that describes the last words of a man like Jacob, the Bible makes sure that his words are recorded accurately. And like I say, I think there's some aspect of prophecy, but when it looks like from the map that the prophecy was wrong, that these tribes are not where the map shows them to be, a couple of things could be going on. The New Testament tells us that now in this earthly life, we prophesy in part. We share as faithfully as we can the prophecies that God gives us, but sometimes He doesn't give us the whole picture. Sometimes we misinterpret the words or proclaim them in a different way than God intended. So I would call this an example of human prophecy. We will also see how some of those prophecies were fulfilled in an undoubtedly accurate way. So that's kind of the way I handle this. The Bible tells us what Jacob said, and it's very accurate in recording those words for us to make whatever use of that we can. But I am not going to say that Jacob was absolutely accurate in all the prophecies that he made. Now, in the example that I just gave about the locations of some of the tribes, I'm saying that the maps that we look at shows those tribes in a different location than where Jacob describes them being. But it's very difficult to come up with an accurate map of the tribal inheritances of in the various regions by those tribes. And the way it's described, I think it's in Joshua where the boundaries of the various tribes are described. It describes them by going from one city to the next or one landmark to the next. And some of those cities, we don't know where they were. Archaeologists have pretty accurate guesses about where some of those are based on evidence that they've dug up in their archaeological digs. But that may or may not be where those cities were located. So I'm not going to hold a modern day Bible map against the Bible and say that the Atlas, the book of maps, gets to judge the Bible and accuse it of being wrong. So I do believe that the Bible is completely inspired by God. The words that are recorded on these pages are accurate. And here I'm going to say something that's going to sound blasphemous. The Bible is full of lies because people in the Bible lied, and the Bible accurately records their words. So the Bible tells us what those people said, but those people were wrong. And, they lied intentionally or accidentally or whatever. So all the Bible claims to do is to record the things that people said and did accurately. So we get an absolutely accurate picture. But again, people either intentionally or unintentionally don't get it right. And the Bible just tells us what they said or did, and then maybe also explains to us that they didn't get it right. So we have to be careful in taking this idea of biblical inspiration in an absolute sense. It is an extraordinary book, written over a period of about 15 or 1600 years by, I think, 44 different authors in different places, different locations, and things like that. And the harmony of the Holy Scriptures is extraordinary. So I don't want to shake anyone's confidence in the accuracy and reliability of the Bible, but I wanted to point that out, particularly as we go into these prophetic blessings that Jacob gives his sons. If you would prefer at this point to fast forward through the background material, feel free to do that at this point, and then start hit play when you get to the Bible software, and we will meet you there. But I am going to go through just a brief presentation of my background PowerPoint material on this. So here we go on that. The book that I have been recommending to go along with this Bible study series, the Genesis series, is my book called Nazarene Essene Theology. It's a systematic theology from Genesis to Revelation, based on the perspectives and the beliefs of the Nazarene Essene sects of Judaism. The Nazarene sect being the one that eventually became the Christian church, full of Jews and Gentiles. Later, it became largely Gentile. But a lot of the material in this book is taken from Genesis, because a huge amount of our theology comes from Genesis. So if you'd like to get a copy of this book and take a look at biblical systematic theology, you can get this book and my other books from Amazon. This is the dispensational chart that we've been using. It's called the Age of Promise. God makes promises in all the eras of biblical history. And so I just need to emphasize that this period of history shown on the chart is not the only period in history when God made promises. But the promises that he did make in this period of history are absolutely essential in understanding biblical theology and all the other periods of history. God is a promise maker, and he's a promise keeper. The main characters in this chapter of biblical history are the patriarchs. This is called the patriarchal dispensation, or period of stewardship that God gave to men to see if they would do a good job or a bad job, and reward or punish them accordingly. Main characters: first generation of the patriarchs, Avram, whose name is changed to Abraham by God. Yitzhak is the second generation. Yaakov is the third generation. His name is also changed to Israel by God, which means a prince who is victorious in battle or struggles and things like that. And he's an overcomer. So that's the third generation. The fourth generation is these 12 sons, and each of them is going to receive a blessing that is pretty accurate here. We mentioned last time in the last chapter, which was Jacob's special blessing upon the children, the sons of Yosef. So there will be no tribal territory of Joseph in the distribution of the Holy Land, the Promised Land. But there will be a distribution to his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, Ephraim and Manasseh. They will, and between those two sons, it's a huge parcel of territory. It may be the largest piece of ground in the Holy Land. But today in chapter 49 of Genesis, Joseph is going to get the blessing because God, through Jacob, has already blessed his sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. The red ribbon of redemption or salvation runs through these four generations, and noticeably through the tribe of Judah. That is the royal tribe, and we'll see that in the blessing that God gives to his son Judah and the tribe that it would emerge from him. It runs through the Egyptian slavery, the period of Egyptian residence by the chosen people of God. And then the Exodus is the next chapter. The Exodus doesn't start in Genesis. It starts in Exodus. And I kind of doubt right now if we will move into Exodus. I think we're going to go back to the New Testament for a while in the next series, but we'll see. Here we have a map of the tribal territories, and I'm just going to gloss over that at this point because when we get to the blessings from the text of Genesis 49, I'll flash back here and show you where the various tribes are located. And the ones that I'll be most interested in showing you are Zvulun or Zebulun and Issachar, these two right here. And when we get to those blessings, we'll want to come to the map to show you that Jacob seems to be putting them in a different location. He seems to put them in the tribe of Asher. Now, this is a map of the distribution of the land in the book of Joshua after the conquest of the Holy Land. And these tribal regions kind of remained until the Civil War that took place after the death of Solomon, King Solomon. But it's not the only reference that the Bible makes to tribal territories. In the book of Ezekiel, and I should have put the Bible text here. I meant to do that, but it's somewhere in chapter 40 through, I think it's 48, somewhere in there. God gives the tribal territories of each of the tribes as they will appear in the millennial kingdom, the messianic kingdom. And you can see that they stretch from the Great Sea, the Mediterranean Sea, to the river Euphrates. These are the boundaries of the Promised Land. Actually, they don't run all the way to the river of Egypt, which is further to the west. This map points to this little wadi out in the middle of the Sinai Desert as being the river of Egypt. And I don't think that's right, but that's popular with map makers. So it shows the each of the tribes like one on top of the other, stretching from the east end to the west end of the promised land. Then it shows where the city of Jerusalem will be and where the new temple will be, the priest's portion, the Levites' portion, and so forth. But again, the tribes that we are interested in chapter 49 are Issachar and Zebulun, and even on the millennial map, it doesn't show them where Jacob describes their location. So I'm going to go back to this map and pause here, and then we will just go ahead to our Bible software and our text for today, and then we'll get started. So for those of you who fast forwarded, I got the wrong Bible here. Let me go back to the right software. If you fast forwarded, welcome to those of us who went through the PowerPoint material at the beginning. I'm getting through it quicker now. It only took 16 minutes on it. Sometimes I take a half hour, 40 minutes on it, but didn't spend that much time today. So Genesis 49:1. And Yaakov called his sons and said, gather together that I may tell you what shall befall you in the last days. I made some reference to that in my introductory remarks. The Hebrew for that is ba in acharit, the afterward or the following or the last, hayamim, the last days. So I mentioned before that this term last days can mean a lot of different things. There are places in the New Testament, like in the book of Hebrews, where it says, but in these last days, like the days of the author of Hebrews, the New Testament era. I think the author of Hebrews was the Apostle Paul, but regardless of who it was, he talks about his own days as being the last days. Well, it's the last days of the Jews being in the Promised Land. It's the last days of the Old Testament era. The New Testament era is getting started, and that's the real comparison that Hebrews makes. But just be real careful about this term, the last days, because it can mean a lot of different things. It's not always talking about the Great Tribulation, the Messianic Kingdom, and the eternal perfect state. So last days. Dake says it's a prophecy outlining the future history of each son and tribe, even into unto the future reign of Messiah. So he's saying it goes up to the eschatological last days, the tribulation, and the Messianic kingdom, the millennial kingdom. But he allows for the history that lies in between the time of Jacob and the time of Messiah. Okay, verse 2, gather together and hear, you sons of Yaakov, and listen to Israel. So here he uses both of his names. And Israel is your father. So I'm your dad, listen to me. These are some of the last words I'll speak to you. Reuven, you are my firstborn. And he was. He was the first son born to Leah, Jacob's wife, that he really never intended to marry, but since she was the oldest, her father, Laban, felt like it was socially prudent to have Jacob marry Leah first and then Rachel later. But he didn't mention that to him before the fact because he knew Jacob would not have gone along with that. So Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might and the beginning of my strength. And this is a typical way that a father would look at his firstborn son. The firstborn son was going to inherit the double portion, would usually take over as the boss of the family business, whether it was something agricultural like farming or shepherding or carpentry or some kind of business, some kind of production. The firstborn son was the one expected to do that. He's the excellency of dignity and the excellency of power. Again, this is the way that a father looked at his firstborn son. But then in verse 4, it starts to go south for Reuben. Unstable as water, you shall not excel. So, what? Kind of unstable in his ways, unstable as water, kind of going wherever the riverbanks or the shore of the ocean will allow. So he just kind of goes to and fro, this way and that. You shall not excel. This will affect his ability to accomplish the goals of his life. Because you went up to your father's bed, then you defiled it. He went up to my couch, Jacob's couch. This is a reference to the story that is told in, I believe it's verse 32, chapter 32 of Genesis, where Reuben slept with one of Jacob's wives, had sexual relations with her, and this was Bilhah. I think it's chapter 32. You'll be able to find it easily if you want to get that story. But this was an embarrassment and a humiliation to his father. So this is one of the reasons why Jacob is saying, you will not measure up to the expectations that a father has as his firstborn. So he kind of lost that status, that privilege, and also the double inheritance. As we saw in the last chapter, chapter 48, the double inheritance goes to Joseph, who was the firstborn son of Jacob's favorite wife, Rachel, but one of the two youngest of the sons. And this is not unusual in the Bible. There are many occasions, particularly in the line of the Messiah, where a firstborn son is overlooked by God in favor of a younger son, usually because the younger son is the one who is the person of faith, who operates and functions in his life by faith, rather than by his intelligence or by his skillfulness and things like that. So oftentimes in the Bible, the firstborn son is overlooked if he's not worthy of being the double inheritor. So that's the prophecy for Reuben. And let me flash back just momentarily to the map and show you where Reuben's territory is. So there's our map over here. Reuben is down here by the Dead Sea. This is a desert territory. But interestingly enough, in the Promised Land, oh, and by the way, it's east of the Jordan River. In the Promised Land, you would expect the cattle operations, the shepherding, husbandry operations to be up here, like in the Shephelah, in the very lush valleys are up here in the north, where it's almost tropical up here in the very north. You would expect that would be where the shepherds would operate, but it's down in the south in Judah and Reuben, and there's hardly any greenery down there. So the shepherds had to, move around all the time to find pasture for their flocks and so forth. So here's Reuben. So then let's go back to our text quickly. Okay, Shimon and Levi are brothers. Instruments of cruelty are in their dwelling place. Cruelty and violence. This is a reference to the attack of these two on the city of Shechem. Is it Genesis 29? No, it doesn't seem to be 34. Yes, okay. In Genesis 34, we have the story of the kidnapping and apparently the raping of Dinah. The one daughter of Jacob that's mentioned in the book of Genesis, she was taken by a local guy named Shechem. His dad's name was Hamor, and apparently his dad named the city after his son Shechem. So there's a city of Shechem and then a young man by that name. So he kidnapped her and raped her, but then he fell in love with her and wanted to marry her. So Hamor and Shechem tried to work a deal with the Israelites, for lack of a better term, the Hebrews is what they were called then, that he would be allowed to marry her. So basically, Shechem says, I love her so much, so whatever you require of me, I'm going to give you. He was probably thinking in terms of money. But Levi and Shimon, the two brothers, kind of got together and said, well, we can't really agree to your desire there because we are a people who customarily and for religious reasons circumcise all of our males. And of course, you guys are uncircumcised Gentiles. So the only way we could ever consider working out a covenant with you is if you would agree to be circumcised. Well, Shechem loved her so much, he was willing to do even that. So, and he was apparently influential enough and persuasive enough that all the men of the city agreed to be circumcised. Well, circumcision is a surgical procedure on a very tender and sensitive part of the male body, especially if you're an adult. But all the guys agreed to do that. So in the aftermath of their surgical procedures, while they were recovering and very much hindered from doing any kind of work or fighting any kind of battle, even a defensive one, then Shimon and Levi and probably some of the servants from the household, maybe some of the other brothers, attacked the city of Shechem, killed everybody, and I think they burned the place to the ground. Yaakov knew nothing about this, at least I don't think he did. When he found out about it, he reprimanded these guys and told them that they had made him a stench in the nostrils of the people who lived in that area. Of course, there was a lot of murder involved here now, so they were going to have to leave the territory because of this heinous act that these two brothers, Levi and Shimon, committed in murdering Shechem, the destruction of the city. They did get their daughter back, and of course, their excuse was these guys humiliated our daughter, and we can't allow that. So we had to inflict appropriate punishment on them. Jacob goes on in his blessing, or actually not so blessed blessing. Let not my soul enter their counsel. And I think what this means, it's here, the word soul is the nephesh, which means the feelings, the animated part of a person. So it can be that in a technical sense, but also this is oftentimes a Hebrew word that's used just to represent the life of a person. So Jacob could just as well be saying, let not my life, or let not me enter their counsel. Here he is saying, I didn't have anything to do with the plan to kill Shechem and destroy the city of Shechem. And, I am not going to enter into any of the plans that they make in the future. Interestingly enough, I'm just seeing here that the Hebrew word for this counsel is be'in sodam. Sodam. Their sod is the Hebrew word. These two letters, Samech and Dalet, are the Hebrew word for secret. In this case, a secret counsel. And notice in the information window at the bottom of the page, it has two different forms of the term counsel. One, counsel is like a what would it be? Like a council meeting, a get together to talk over business. Counsel, in the sense of counsel, is to give advice to another person, like a counselor, a psychiatrist, or a psychologist would give to a patient. So this is a secret council. Let not my soul enter their secret council. Let not my honor be united to their assembly. The word assembly is kahal. It's the same word that's used for a like a congregation, a house church, something like that. It's often used with references to a synagogue, so a gathering place for worship and doing religious business or even secular business. So don't let my honor be united with their assembly. Honor is kavodi. Kavod means it's glory, it's a weightiness, kind of the heaviness of God that when he's present, you can almost physically feel it in the air. If you hold your hands out, you can feel the tingling in the palms of your hands and so forth. But kavod is also used as honor. So this is a good translation. Let now my honor, my weightiness be united to their assembly. For in their anger they slew a man, and I assume that's Shechem. They didn't slay only one man; they slew many men, and in their self they hamstrung an ox. It's a strange expression. Who knows what it has anything to do with? One thing that occurred to me is that Shechem's dad's name was Hamor, and that is the Hebrew word for a donkey. But a shor is like an ox. It's a bigger animal than a donkey. It's like oxes were used for plowing fields and, hauling the plows around. So hamstrung an ox. Let me see if I can find it. Ikru, aker means to hamstring, to uproot. So hamstring would be a kind of a technical, very narrow definition of the word. Akor means to uproot, to break down. I think sometimes it's translated tear down or pull down. So this is just a mystery expression. Ikru shor, hamstrung an ox. And I just can't tell you what it means. You might want to check some of the commentators and see what they say. Cursed be their anger, still talking about Shimon and Levi, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will divide them in Yaakov and scatter them in Israel. So a couple of things here. Let's go back to our map briefly in the PowerPoint. So we will point out where Shimon is. It's in this kind of green circle that's right in the middle of Judah. If I move this map up a little bit, I guess I can't move that map up a little bit. Judah extends further south than this, so Shimon is surrounded by Judah. So the isolation of Shimon was carried out by placing it in the midst of the tribe of Judah, which was the royal tribe, the tribe with legal authority and things like that. So that was a way of isolating Shimon. If you look at the map, you will not find a geographical region that is assigned to Levi, because Levi were the religious workers. The sons of Aaron, who was a Levi. Moses was a Levite. The descendants of Aaron will be the high priests. Aaron was Moses' brother. They will be the high priests, and then all the remainder of the Levites would assist them in the temple and tabernacle operations, and also in providing religious instruction in all the communities. On one of the maps that I have, it shows where all the Levitical cities are, and they're just scattered all over the territory. This map doesn't show it, but the tribe is scattered all over the territories, and then at particular months, during particular months of the year, wherever they were located, that tribe would come down to Jerusalem, which is not on this map. It was not called Jerusalem at that point. Oh, here it is. Yes, Jerusalem, right there. So they would come to Jerusalem, where the tabernacle and the temple were eventually. Actually, yeah, the tabernacle was there also. They would serve for a couple of weeks, or maybe just 1 week. Yeah, 1 week, twice a year, and then they would go home to wherever their territory was. So that was the way of kind of scattering Levi all over the country, was to make him the religious tribe, the priestly tribe. So back to our text, they're scattered, scattering them all over Israel. And here Yaakov is calling the land, the territory, he's calling it Israel. Yehuda, Judah, you are he whom your brothers shall praise. Interestingly enough, the name Yehuda is one of the Hebrew words for praise. Hallel, like in hallelujah, is another word for that. So a lot of words for praise. This is one of them. It also means to confess, like to admit your sins or to agree with God, to say the same thing as God says about himself, about the world we live in, about ourselves, and stuff like that. So the name Judah means praise. And in the birth of, what did I do here? My my verse jumped, but we're where we should be. Okay. When Judah was born, his mom, also Leah, I think he's the the third oldest. Maybe it's the fourth oldest of Leah. Leah named him Yehuda and said that she was praising God when she did. So her intention was that his name should mean praise. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. So the royal tribe is frequently a warlike tribe. Judah will be the leading tribe, will usually go to battle at the head of the column, on the front lines there fighting. And remember that Israel, one of the meanings of the name Israel, the country and the person, it means a prince who is victorious with God. So these have to be believers in God. God grants them victory in battle. So they are a very powerful tribe, therefore a ruling tribe. So a prince, a sar, Yisrael, is royalty. Your father's children shall bow down before you. So Judah's father would be Jacob, and Jacob's children would bow down to Judah, because he is being chosen, as we will see as we continue through his blessing. He's being chosen as the royal tribe, the tribe from which the kings will come. And all the other tribes will bow down to him, because that's the royal tribe. That's their king, their leaders, God's chosen leaders come from that tribe. Now, this is interesting because Joseph, in the story of Joseph, when he's a young man, he has a couple of dreams. And in both of the dreams, the ones of the gathering the sheaves in the field, and then the gathering of the family together, and all the brothers, and even the parents bow down to Joseph. And that happened. That happened literally in the story of Joseph becoming the prime minister of Egypt. And then during the days of famine, the brothers come down to buy food, and they end up bowing before their brother Joseph. So literally fulfilling that prophecy several times. But here it's saying Judah is the one to whom the brothers will bow down, because Joseph is not the royal tribe. He is the tribe, I think, that represents in typological fashion, symbolic fashion. He tells us a lot about the Messiah, a lot of the treatment that Joseph received, the Messiah also received. So in the sense that he is a type of Messiah, and Messiah is from the tribe of Judah, then yes, the brothers are, bowing down. But these are two different branches of the family tree, Judah and Joseph. So I guess in two different ways, one literally and one symbolically, the other tribe members, the other brothers' families, bow down before their leaders, their what authoritative ones. Yehuda is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He bows down, he lies as a lion, lies down as a lion, and as a lion, who shall arouse him? So he the first of all, the iconic symbol of the tribe of Judah is a lion. Jesus, Yeshua, is called the Lion of Judah, the Ariel of Yehuda. He's also called the Lamb of God, but he's called the Lion of Judah. So most scholars believe that when Yeshua returns in power and great glory, he will come as the Lion of the tribe of Judah. When he came the first time, he came as the suffering servant. He came as the savior of the world. But when he comes back, he will come as the conquering king who will conquer the world and rule it for 1,000 years. So here that tribe is depicted as a lion. And their, what would you call it? Their banner or their ensign for that tribe is the lion. And all the other tribes have symbolic symbols and things too. This borders a little bit on idolatry and, the using of images, like in idolatry. But they get away with it here because the Ten Commandments have not been given yet. Okay, verse 10, the scepter, the Shebet. Interesting word because first of all, it's what you call a tribe. So it means a tribe, but it also means like a stick that it means a scepter. It means like a symbolic tool of a king or a prince or even a queen. So it's a scepter, but it's also the word for a tribe. And the scepter shall not depart from Yehuda. So since a scepter symbolizes royalty, that means royalty will not depart from Yehuda, nor a lawgiver from between his feet. Couple of things here. When we use the term lawgiver, mahokek is the Hebrew word. A hok is a commandment or a command. The word Torah actually doesn't mean commandment or a command. It means instruction. It means to like throw information out there for people. But when we think of the lawgiver, we think of Moses, who came from the tribe of Levi. But this is the tribe of Judah. So the lawgiver, since Moses is from Judah, how could the lawgiver come from Judah? Well, there's another lawgiver in the Bible besides Moses. And the book of Hebrews acknowledges both Moses and the other lawgiver and compares and contrasts them and says that the other lawgiver besides Moses is the better one. And of course, what the author of Hebrews is talking about is Yeshua, who is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He is the Savior of the world. But he's also the lawgiver in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapters 5 through 7, 3 chapters dedicated to Jesus giving the law from a mountaintop that will govern the New Testament. So Jesus is a lawgiver too, and he does come from Judah. Now, this idea from between his feet, several times in these videos, we have talked about how sometimes the word feet, regel in Hebrew, is used as a euphemism for the reproductive organs. And feet isn't the only word that's used in that way. Sometimes the word thigh is used that way. So I know when Abraham sends his servant who was, what was his name? Eleazar. And I'm not sure the text tells us it's Eleazar, but it turns out that's what his name is. He's going to send Eleazar up to the north to the extended family living up in Padanaram to choose a wife for his son Yitzhak. Turns out to be Rebecca. And before he sends him up there, he tells Eleazar to put his hand under my thigh. Well, it's probably not a reference to his thigh. It's probably a reference to his reproductive organ. So swear on the covenant symbol of circumcision and the reproductive power that God is giving this family. Swear on that, that you'll do a good job in finding, a wife for my son. And then it happens another time too that we talked about. I don't remember exactly what the circumstances are. So what this is actually saying is the lawgiver shall not depart from between his reproductive organs, between his feet. I mean, the reproductive organs are literally between his feet until Shiloh comes. Shiloh is a word that baffles a lot of the translators. I think Dake gives the accurate, the lawgiver, the chachuk, till Shiloh comes. Shiloh comes. Shiloh is an epithet of the Mashiach and can have no other meaning. It refers to the second coming of Mashiach who will fulfill the next part of this verse. And I think that's accurate. Some people try to make this the Hebrew word shelach, which means to send, like until the one that God sends, but that's not it. Shalach has a chet on the end. This has a hey on the end, so it's spelled differently. It's a different word. Some people try to make a connection here with the word peace, shalom. And it's not that either, because shalom is spelled differently. And shalom, like fulfillment, completeness, is spelled differently also. So what this word means is, and here our study aids with this Bible software don't help us, because it just says it's a proper noun. So all it gives us is the name. It is a name. The she at the beginning, the sh sound, means the one that or which. Lo means to him, to him. And there's an H on the end, which would tend to make it feminine, but oftentimes the feminine can have like a directional meaning or something like this. But the lamed here with the holem vowel right beside it means to him. So what this literally means is until that which is to him comes. Well, who's the him? It's the lawgiver. It's Yeshua, who came for the first time as the lawgiver and will come, as Dake says, at the second coming, and then he will be the conquering king. And to him, and the New King James capitalizes that because they realize that this is talking about Yeshua, the second person of the Trinity, and to him shall be the obedience of the people. And I might add here, this will be the obedience of all the people, not just the Israelites. Interestingly, the Bible seems to indicate that, well, let me take a step back. If you know anything about modern day Judaism, you know that the vast majority of Jewish people do not accept Yeshua as the Messiah, do not accept Jesus as the Christ. Many of them are still expecting that the Messiah will come because the Bible promises it, but they don't think it's Jesus. And they won't understand that it's Jesus until they've gone through the great tribulation. And at the very end, when he comes in power and great glory, they will take a look at him coming in the clouds, and then they will realize who he was. And the Bible says they will mourn for him as one mourns for like an only son. They will acknowledge him as the one who was pierced for their sins. And then at long last, they will say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. That's what Yeshua is waiting to hear. So he will give them the new birth. He will send the Holy Spirit into their hearts. And as a mass, as a people group, as a nation, they will become believers in one day. In one day, they will become a believing nation. And that fulfills what the Apostle Paul says. All Israel will be saved when Yeshua returns. So, yes, all the Jewish people will obey him. The Gentile people who obey him will be blessed and will have access to his rule, which will be a rule of peace and prosperity. The rebellious nations will not have the same kind of privileges that the believing nations will have. And and there will be, at the end of the millennium, there will be a rebellion among the unbelievers, which will be overthrown by fire and brimstone coming down from heaven to squelch that and silence it. Then all the rebellious people will experience the great white throne judgment, and they will go to their eternal destiny, which will be the lake of fire. Fire and brimstone, eternal punishment. So all the people will obey, or they will be punished. They will be judged. So after the millennium, after the 1,000-year kingdom, that's when the renewal or the destruction and recreation of the earth by fire will take place. The new heavens and the new earth will emerge, and that will be what is called the eternal perfect state. The God ruling with his people. There will no longer be any unbelievers because they will have been judged by that time. And so for the faithful, they will receive their great eternal and everlasting reward of living and functioning in the face-to-face presence of their glorious Lord and Savior, Yeshua HaMashiach. Okay, verse 11, binding his donkey to the vine. Now, when I read through this, well, that's kind of interesting because when Jesus rides into Jerusalem, Matthew 21 and whatever chapters it is in Mark and Luke, he rides on a donkey. And before he rides into Jerusalem on that donkey, he sends two of his disciples into the neighboring town, which I think is, it's not Bethany, it is Bethphage, the house, what is that? The house of ripe figs, I believe. And to get a donkey that's, to unloose a donkey that's tied up. I don't think it says what it's tied up to, but it could be a vine. So, the Messiah rides in on this donkey, and maybe it was tied to a vine. Maybe that's a fulfillment of prophecy. And his donkey's colt. So in that story, it's a donkey and a colt are brought to Yeshua, to the choice vine. He washed his garments in wine and his clothes in the blood of grapes. Now, this could just be talking about, the grape harvest and the wine that's produced and stuff like that. And blood of grapes could be a figurative term. But when we look at the end of the Great Tribulation, when Jesus comes in power and great glory and destroys his enemies, it talks about his clothing being stained by the blood of his enemies who are defeated by his almighty power. So I think this could be an example of talking about how Jesus comes in power and glory and destroys his enemy, and it will be a bloodbath. It will be a bloodbath in the valley of destruction, the Jezreel Valley, the valley of Armageddon. Now, it talks about washing his garments in wine or in the blood of grapes. And when you wash your garments in grape juice or blood, they're not going to remain white. But I think there is a symbolic meaning, a very powerful symbolic meaning here. I can say to you that I am washed in the blood of Christ, and that's why I'm clean. That's why I'm pure. So when Jesus conquers his enemies and leaves them dead on the battlefield, in a way, he will be purifying the earth of all these people who are hostile to him, the armies of his enemies. So yeah, I think that that may have to do with battle. And again, the tribe of Judah is a warring people. His eyes are darker than wine and his teeth whiter than milk. Kind of the way I picture him coming in power and great glory. So that's it for Judah. And we already looked at Judah on the map where it is. Then we have Zvulun or Zebulun. He shall dwell by the haven of the sea. Hebrew word there is yam. It's usually a large body of water like the Mediterranean. And he shall become a haven for ships, for aniot. The Bible distinguishes between large ships and small boats. Ania is a ship, like a decked ship with, compartments below deck and things like that. A sira is a smaller boat, like a rowboat. So an ania is a rowboat. In the modern Israeli Bible Society, modern Hebrew version of the New Testament, they use sirah throughout the New Testament. And I think they do it in error. I think the fishing boats, I think were large, decked boats, covered boats, sailing vessels. Perhaps they could be rowed, but not necessarily. So anyway, this is talking about large seagoing vessels, and his border shall adjoin Sidon or Sidon. Let's go back to our map and take a look at the territory of Zvulun. I talked about this a little bit in the introduction, but here's Zvulun. Now, as far as the sea is concerned, we have a couple of options. The Mediterranean Sea here, this is called the Sea of Galilee, but it's basically a lake, and Zvulun doesn't touch either one of them. Now, Sidon is up here connected to Tyre, so this is the region that's being looked at. But all this territory between Zvulun and the sea is attributed to Asher, again, based on the cities that seem to make up the boundaries. But you notice there aren't many cities up here, so it could be that Zvulun extended to the north here and butted up against Tyre and Sidon. So that's a possibility. I don't know if the boundaries include this Litani River up here. That would be a likely physical boundary. But anyway, this seems like it could be a contradiction. So we've already talked about the inspiration of the Bible and also the difficulty of making accurate maps when the markers, the boundary markers, are in locations that we don't really know where they were. So Zvulun may have been closer to the Mediterranean. Naphtali also separates it from the Sea of Galilee, but that's a possibility. So Zvulun may have extended over here closer to the Sea of Galilee. And then Issachar, I think, is the next one that is described. And we'll see if this is an accurate location also. So, okay, let's go back to our text here. Haven for ships is border shall don't. Issachar is a strong donkey lying down between two burdens. He saw that rest was good and that the land was pleasant. He bowed his shoulder to bear a burden, and he became a band of slaves. So this is talking about kind of a lazy, kind of a stubborn, a strong donkey lying down between two burdens, like, refusing to be a beast of burden, to carry his rightful load. He saw rest was good and that the land was pleasant. He bowed his shoulder, and he became a band of slaves. I think Dake tells us that the location of Zvulun, was near the valley of Esdraelon. That's the Jezreel Valley, uh, down in kind of the fruitful lowlands, the plains, the fertile plains is where that is. And on the map, it showed kind of the southern tip dipping down towards that. The Valley of Esdraelon was fertile and subject to raids. Rather than give up their portion or defended by the sword, they consented to pay tribute. And they're not the only tribe that did that, but they're not a particularly aggressive tribe that's willing to defend its own property. Dan comes next. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. And you might, well, why will he judge? Well, his name, Dan means judgment in Hebrew. And it's not the only word that means judgment. Shofet is another Hebrew word that means to judge. But Dan also judges. And when he was born, his mom named him Judge because she wanted God to judge between her and whoever was giving her trouble. As one of the tribes, a judge of one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent by the way, a viper by the path that bites the horse's heels so that its rider shall fall backwards. Then it goes on, I have waited for your salvation, O Lord. I don't know if this is Jacob talking about himself or if this will be like the cry of Dan. But the salvation, Jesus brought it in his first coming. For those who of his own people who rejected him, he will redeem and save them in his second coming. I want to go back to the map again briefly and talk a little bit about Dan. If we look on the map, the territory of Dan is here in the kind of the orange color, and it's down south of Ephraim, west of Benjamin, and to the north of Yehuda. It's this territory right here. Now, this is the territory that was assigned to Dan by Joshua in the conquest. But this is also the land of the Philistines, and there were a lot of giants out here. And Dan was just really too weak or too lazy or unwilling to defend this land and to conquer it and destroy their enemies. So I think they came to Joshua and said, we're too wimpy for the land that you gave us. So can we have an alternative? So Joshua sent them up here to the extreme north. There is a city there that is called Dan on the map. I think it was called something else before that. I want to say it was Lutz or Luz or something like that. But when Dan went up there and settled in this territory, it was the whole territory was called Dan. So I don't think there was a territory of Dan remaining down here. I think they just moved it up to the north. And frequently in the Bible, it will talk about the whole entirety of the promised land in terms of from Dan to Beersheba. So they're talking about from the very north to down here at Beersheba in the very south. There is, of course, territory owned by Judah south of there, but this is kind of the last point of civilization. You come down here further and you're out into that'd probably be the Sinai desert. Definitely a desert down here. So Dan to Beersheba. So Dan was not able to conquer and settle this land, so they are up in the north in future references to the tribe of Dan. Then we come to God, and I'm pronouncing it in the Hebrew. In English, it has an A in the middle, so we say Gad, but in Hebrew, it's pronounced God with a kametz under the gimel, so it's pronounced God, not a reference to the divine being. The divine being is Elohim. God is an English word. So God is a troop, and God, a troop, shall tramp upon him, but he shall triumph at last. So God or Gadud means, here's the name God. Gadud is what his name means. That is a troop, or what else? A band, like a military unit. And here is the word gadud again in a different form, a verbal form, a passive form. It says it's imperfect, but it's got a shurek in there, which usually indicates passive. So a troop shall tramp upon him, upon God. So that's what the Hebrew is saying there. But he, the God and the tribe, shall triumph at last. Who Yagud will troop Akev, heel at last, footprint, heel, footprint. Um, hmm, kind of a mysterious term. Uh, Now another tribe, bread from Asher shall be rich, and he shall yield royal dainties. Asher means blessed, like the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is good. That's Ashureha, Aniye Haruach, Aniye Ruach, and he shall yield royal dainties. Some of these guys just get very brief blessings. I think Asher is up in the north. We'll take a peek at the map here briefly. Yeah, here's Asher along the seashore, but we've already said it may not extend up quite that far north, but that's where Asher is located. Then we have bread from Asher. Then verse 21, we have Naphtali is a deer let loose. He uses beautiful words. This was the second son of Bilhah, Rachel's maidservant girl. Then we come to Yosef, verse 22. Yosef is a fruitful bough by a well. His branches run over the wall. So the idea of fruitfulness, fertility, a well just makes things all the more fruitful. His branches run over the wall. The archers have bitterly grieved him, shot at him, and hated him. Sounds a lot like his brothers, doesn't it? Dake's comment here, it says, picturing the many enemies of Joseph and his descendants, beginning with his own brothers and including others who fought against Ephraim and Manasseh. These, of course, are Joseph's two sons. Each one of them gets a territory in the promised land. We'll look at the map in a few minutes and I'll show you the extent of the territory, and it's huge. Verse 24, but his bow remained in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty God of Yaakov. From there is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. Now, the stone or the rock of Israel, the Evan, sounds like a term of the Messiah. We know the good shepherd, Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd. These are terms that seem to be talking about the Messiah, but the Messiah is not from the tribe of Joseph. He's from the tribe of Judah. But again, this tribe of Joseph is typical of the Messiah. So this could be indicating that the son of Jacob, who typified the Messiah, will, in a figurative and symbolic way, give birth to the shepherd and the stone of Israel, but not literally and physically. By the God of your father, who will help you, and by the Almighty, who will bless you. It's not his father who would help him, but the God of his father will help you, and by the Almighty, who will bless you with blessings of heaven, blessings of the deep that lies beneath, blessings of the breast, the Shaddai. The Shaddaim is the Hebrew word for breasts. Some try to say that the name of God, El, short term for Elohim, Shaddai, El Shaddai, is usually translated Almighty, but Shaddaim is like a derived use of the term Shaddai. So I'm going to stick with Almighty. I'm not going to say that God the Father is like a God with breasts or anything like that. And with the gender confusion these days, you can imagine how the term El Shaddai is kind of being what people are trying to make more out of that, I think, than the Bible does. Blessings of the breast and of the womb. This is just talking about reproduction. The tribe of Joseph is going to have lots of kids. They're going to be a very fertile people. The blessings of your father have excelled the blessings of my ancestors. Up to the utmost bounding of the everlasting hills, they shall be on the head of Yosef and on the crown of the head of him who was separate from his brothers. And again, reference to being hated by his brothers and sold by them into slavery and so forth. Let me go to the map and show you the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. We'll start on the east of the Jordan River, which runs from the very northern tip of this would be this is kind of the Golan Heights area today. Runs all the way south to the is that the Yavok River? I think that's the Yavok River. And Girgassa and stuff like that. So it's like halfway between, it runs all the way down to the halfway point between the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea. This is a huge, huge territory, but that's just the eastern half of it. If we go on the west side, we have all this yellow area, and that is Western Manasseh. It's a huge tribe with huge territory. And then here's the other son, Ephraim, is north of Dan, north of Benjamin, and south of West Manasseh. Smaller tribes, smaller territory. But look at all the territory in the Promised Land that's covered. Seems to be, you know, competitive size with Judah and Shimon. So look at the amount of territory that that Joseph, through his two sons, inherits. Pretty amazing. Okay, verse 27, Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil. So it makes Benjamin into kind of a violent, warlike tribe. And the first king of Israel is going to come from the tribe of Benjamin. That would be Shaul, Saul, the son of, oh, what was his father's name? Although I can't remember. So anyway, a king is going to come from him, but it will be a failed king. So God's choice will be a king, David. David will come from the tribe of Judah, and then God will make a covenant with David that one of his descendants will sit on the throne forever. And all of the kings of Judah were in that family line of David up to and including the Messiah. And now the Messiah doesn't have any kids, but he doesn't need any because he's going to live forever. So he's not sitting on the throne in Jerusalem now. There is no throne in Jerusalem, but if there were, he's not sitting on it. He's sitting on his father's throne in heaven, awaiting a time when he'll come to earth, and then he will sit on the throne in Jerusalem and rule from there for 1,000 years and beyond into eternity. He will rule the whole world from there. But that's not from the tribe of Benjamin. That is from the tribe of Judah. So verse 28, all these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is what their father spoke to them. And he blessed them. He blessed each one according to his own blessing, not necessarily God's blessing. This is what Jacob wished for his sons. And a lot of it comes true. A lot of it is prophetic, especially the stuff of Judah, Levi, and Joseph. Then he charged them and said to them, I am to be gathered to my people. In other words, I'm going to die. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Hittite, and that is in the cave that is in the field of Machpelah, which is before Mamre, a modern-day Hebron in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought with the field of Ephron the Hittite as a possession for a burial place. So we've looked at that before. You know where Hebron is on the map. Then verse 31, there they buried Abraham and Sarah, his wife, and they buried Yitzhak and Rivka, his wife, and there I buried Leah. When Leah died, Yaakov made sure she was buried in the family burial plot there. On the other hand, Rachel, his favorite wife, uh, was not buried there. She died giving birth to Benjamin down around Bethlehem in Ephratah, which I believe is a little bit north of Bethlehem, and that's I believe he purchased a tomb there. Nowadays, if you visit the Promised Land, you can go to the Kavar Rachel, which is the burial site of Rachel there. The field and the cave that is there were purchased from the sons of Het. The Ephron was a Hittite of the sons of Het. And when Yaakov had finished commanding his sons, he drew his feet up into the bed and breathed his last and was gathered to his people. So here the great patriarch Yaakov breathes his last. He dies. His soul and spirit separated and went to a place in the underworld called Paradise, called the bosom of Abraham, awaiting the descent of Messiah after his crucifixion. He descended into hell and led all those believing captives to the third heaven, the Father's house, with many mansions. Now paradise is in heaven rather than hell. So I'm a little saddened at the death of Yaakov. He's played such an important, prominent role. The nation of Israel will go by his second given name, Israel. The people will be called Israelites instead of Hebrews, as in the past. So that brings us to the end of chapter 49. We've got one more chapter to go, which will discuss the death of Yosef, another very important player. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint here and just share a couple of verses with you from Hebrews 11, 21 through 22. This is New Testament. By faith, Yaakov, when he was dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph. That's what we've been reading about in our study for today, and worshiped, leaning on the top of his staff. Now, Genesis doesn't say anything about leaning on the top of his staff, but the New Testament does. So the author of Hebrews apparently was given some inspiration that had to do with Joseph. Now, I'm sorry, with Jacob. Now, we mentioned before that the word Shebet can mean it can mean like a scepter. This could be a scepter that he's talking about. He may have leaned on the top of it in some kind of a ceremonial way to symbolize the fact that, like, he is passing on to the next generation the the royalty. If that's the case, then it probably would have gone to Judah if that was his staff. It might have been a walking stick. It might have been a crutch. It might have been a shepherd's staff. Who knows? But then the author of Hebrews goes on to say, by faith, Yosef, when he was dying, made mention of the departure of the children of Israel and gave instructions concerning his bones. So I included these two verses because in chapter 49, we say Jacob giving the blessing as his last words, and then giving instructions about his body, where he wants to be buried. He does not want to be buried in Egypt. It's not the promised land, and he doesn't want to be buried there. Same with Joseph. So he gives instructions for where he's to be buried, passes on the scepter, maybe to Judah, and then he dies. And then the next verse is by faith Joseph, when he was dying, made mention of the departure of that's the Exodus of the children of Israel from Egypt, and gave instructions concerning his bones. And we'll read about that. We'll read about that the next time. So let me go ahead and give you a blessing. Since this is about blessings, and it's from the Hebrew Bible, Let me give you the priestly blessing from the book of Numbers. And in this blessing, we will say the sacred name of God, as I think Numbers chapter 6 instructs us to do. Yivarechecha Yahweh vayishmarecha, Ya'er Yahweh panav elecha v'yuchanecha, Isa Yahweh panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. The Lord, Yahweh, bless you and keep you. Yahweh, make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. Yahweh, lift up his countenance on you and give you peace. Shalom, dear friends, and hope we'll see you next time for Genesis